Welcome, everyone. So wonderful to be here with you. Of course, I wish we were actually together, but this is exciting. And we're so happy to be here to celebrate our 2020 virtual Engage for Change Awards celebration. I am Sylvia Gale, Executive Director of the Bonner Center for Civic Engagement at the University of Richmond. And as we begin our program today, I want to invite us all to take a pause, take a breath. Let's land here together. And what I invite us to do first is acknowledge the land that we are inhabiting together in Richmond, Virginia, that this is land that was in fact dispossessed from Indigenous people. The land on which the University of Richmond sits is within the territory of the Powhatan people. And more recently, as we've been studying at the University of Richmond, over the course of a century, this land was inhabited by hundreds of people who were enslaved on plantations that at various times contained all or part of our current campus. You can learn more about that history by following the link that is being dropped in the chat. But I want to pause here to acknowledge those histories, those stories, those lives, because they are so often left out and erased. And as our keynote speaker, who we'll hear from shortly, wrote in his daily email earlier this week as he commemorated Virginia's first official celebration of Indigenous Peoples Day, perhaps the most basic human emotional need is simply to be seen, to know the dignity of being acknowledged for who you are. So as we acknowledge the change makers in our midst today, let us also acknowledge those who were here before, many of whose names we will never know. Thank you for taking that pause with me. Today, this afternoon, we are kicking off our annual celebration of students, faculty, staff, and community partners who see opportunities to make change and take action. And you might ask, in the midst of a pandemic, what purpose does an awards ceremony serve? We've thought about this, and for us in the Bonner Center for Civic Engagement, it feels even more important this year to acknowledge the commitment and the resilience that underlie civic action, and that is what we are here to do. So before I announce this year's winners of our Engage for Change Awards, I want to express our tremendous gratitude to 2020 graduate and art major Yue Lin for designing this year's award print that you see on the screen. Her print captures beautifully the disruption and collective action that characterize our time. Thank you, Yue, for sharing your talent with us. And now, imagine a drum roll. It is my honor to announce the 2020 award winners. I will say a tiny bit about each one. It is truly only to whet your appetite to learn more. We're kicking off a whole week next week of spotlighting these honorees and sharing more about their work and actually presenting them with their beautiful awards. But for now, the award winners are George Hiller, has been selected to receive the Community Engaged Teaching Award. The award recognizes Professor Hiller's consistently demonstrated excellence in working to build the capacity of students and community members in order to effect positive change and further learning. Alicia Diaz has been selected to receive the Community Engaged Scholarship Award. This award recognizes scholarly and creative work that has emerged from mutually beneficial partnerships and created new knowledge that contributes to the public good. Maria Navarro Castillo and Brianna Silva have each been selected as recipients of the Service for Change Award. This award recognizes their commitment to service and relationship building in the Richmond community, and also the spirit in which they have engaged, which includes a commitment to valuing the dignity and worth of every individual and a sustained and ethical approach to engagement. Lauren Stenson and Emma Johnson have been selected to receive the Activism for Change Award for their work to create Interpoint, a team of students who lead cross-cultural dialogues focused on issues of race, equity, and inclusion. And a second Activism for Change Award has been awarded to Kayla Corbin, Akia Fortson Brown, Shira Greer, TJ Tan, and Quell Shaw, the members of the Africana Studies Student Committee, whose proposal last spring that UR establish an Africana Studies department continues to propel significant change making in our community. And finally, the East End Cemetery Collaboratory is this year's recipient of the Collaboration for Change Award for their deep commitment to collaboration, to curation and documentation of African American history and culture in Richmond, and to the reclamation of the historic cemetery site. I told you it would just be a teaser. Please visit our website for more information on these outstanding honorees and the work we are celebrating them for. And tune in with us live on Spiders Engage social media next week as we present their awards to them and share more detail about their impressive work. And for now, please don't hesitate to use the chat to share your enthusiasm and your congratulations. Many of those special people are here with us, and I know Zoom can be just a little too quiet for moments like this. So make some noise in the chat while I introduce our speakers today. As is our practice at our Engage for Change celebration, which we are now in our third annual Engage for Change, we have invited a community change maker to share their perspective on what it means to engage for change. It's my great pleasure to welcome this year's speaker, Richmond Public Schools Superintendent Jason Kamras. We are also honored today to be joined by 3 University of Richmond panelists who have prepared questions for Superintendent Kamras to share after his remarks. And those panelists, who you also see on your screen, are Laura Browder, Tyler and Alice Haynes Professor of American Studies, Cassie Gilboy, class of 2019, and also first grade teacher at Richmond Public Schools Broad Rock Elementary School, and Omar Ibrahim, class of 21, who is a Bonner Scholar and a Leadership Studies major. Superintendent Kamras, but I have to say anyone who receives his wonderful daily emails knows him as Jason, and I will introduce him as Jason, views public education as a means of promoting equity and justice for all children in the United States. In his various roles, he has advocated for policies to eliminate the opportunity gap that disadvantages many low-income children and children of color. And he has led efforts to dismantle institutionalized racism in public schools. He began his career in education in 1996 as a middle school math teacher in Washington, D.C. In 2005, he was named the United States National Teacher of the Year. Before coming to RPS to serve as superintendent in 2017, Jason served in numerous senior leadership roles at DC public schools. He earned his bachelor's degree from Princeton University and his master's in education from the Harvard Graduate School of Education. And on top of these impressive accomplishments, I want to note that so many of us have been inspired over the past 7 months by his leadership during the pandemic. And we are absolutely delighted and honored that he's with us today. Jason, thank you for taking the time to be here, and welcome.
Thank you so much, Sylvia, for that incredibly kind introduction. And congratulations to all of the winners of this incredible award. Let me just join in the chorus of kudos that I saw in the chat just now. What an incredible celebration of commitment to the community here in Richmond. So to each and every one of you, I hope at some point we get to meet in person and I can face-to-face say congratulations. But in the meantime, I hope you'll take this virtual congratulations as a best substitute. Let me also just say thank you to, we have a RPS teacher on the panel. I'm super excited to hear a little bit more from her. We have RPS alums, we have RPS parents. So to all of the RPS folks who are watching, whether you are an alum or a teacher or a parent, whatever the case may be, community partner, thank you so much. I am blessed with just a wonderful team of folks here at RPS who are working so hard to improve the lives of kids here in Richmond. So enormous gratitude to each and every one of you. I thought today I'll be relatively brief because these virtual settings go much better with the Q&A part, I have found, than with the speechifying part. So what I thought I would do is just share 3 stories with you. And these 3 stories span nearly a century, and they're about 3 young men. One is named Alvin, one is named Spotswood, and one is named Corey. So I want to tell you about the 3 of them who never met each other, and yet I feel they are connected in a really important way, which I think will become clear over the course of the narrative. So I'll begin with Alvin. Alvin is actually my maternal grandfather. He was born in 1917 on the Lower East Side of New York. My family is Jewish, and as was the case with many Jewish children at that time growing up in New York City, their mother's greatest wish for them was to become a doctor, and that is what he most wanted to do as well. He was deeply committed, he was brilliant, but unfortunately at that time in the 20s and 30s, when he was going through school, there were quotas for the number of Jewish students who could attend medical school. And so despite the fact that he was first in his class in college, he was not able to gain entry to any medical school. And as a result of that, he was really at a loss for what to do with his life. And he remained so committed to serving others through healthcare that he decided the next best option for him was to go to dental school. And there weren't any quotas at the time. So he applied, was accepted, went all the way through dental school, was extremely successful, earned his degree. And once he did that and was about to begin to work as a dentist in New York City, the quotas for medical school began to ease. And so he reapplied, was accepted, and then went on to earn his medical degree, finished at the top of his class, and went on to serve as an internist in New York City for 50 years, serving families of all backgrounds. And I start there because it was a really powerful example for me growing up, and I would hear this story as a child, of the power that education has both to hold people back when it is not equitably distributed, but also when it is equitably distributed to lift people up. And that really, from a young age for me, became a very powerful theme and something that really struck me as crucial in our lives, in our country's trajectory. And when education is not granted equitably, how angry that made me, thinking about my grandfather who was at the top of his class and all he wanted to do was to become a doctor, but he couldn't because of who he was. Second story is about a young man named Spotswood Bowling. Spotswood was 11 years old in the year 1950. And he wanted to attend a brand new school in Washington, D.C. By the name of John Philip Sousa Junior High School. And there was one problem. He was Black, and the school was only for white students. And that struck Spotswood as wrong. And just as I was feeling angry for my grandfather. He was angry for himself and for his peers who were forced at that time to go to overcrowded schools that had poor facilities and secondhand textbooks. And here was this brand new, beautiful school that was closer to where he lived than the one he had to go to. And yet he was denied entry once again because of who he was. And so Spotswood and a number of his peers challenged the constitutionality of segregation of our public schools in Washington, D.C. And his case actually made it all the way to the Supreme Court. It's actually one of the 5 cases that was decided when Brown versus Board of Education was decided. Not everybody realizes, but there are actually 5 cases that were all combined when Brown was decided. And in 1954, in a very important case called Bowling v. Sharp, you can look it up, public education in our nation's capital was officially desegregated. It just so happens that about 40 years later, in 1996, I was hired as a middle school math teacher at John Philip Sousa, then middle school. And I was always struck from the very first day that I entered the school. They had class pictures of the 8th grade graduating class in the hallway. And you see in 1950, it's all white. In 1951, it's all white. In 1952, it's all white. In 1953, it's all white. In 1954, it's all white. And then desegregation happened, and it becomes more integrated. But by 1960, it had become 100% African American as the white community fled the neighborhood, as was the case in many cities all across the country during desegregation. And both Spotswood's story and what happened after desegregation has always stayed with me. Much like my grandfather, the opportunity that was initially denied to Spotswood because of simply who he was, but also the reaction of the community to this monumental change in how we educate our children, that in less than 10 years, an entire community decided to, in essence, pick up and leave because the idea of going to school, white and black children together, was untenable to them. And the effect that that had on that community for decades thereafter. And that then leads me to my third story about a young man named Corey. Corey actually is an RPS student who I met very early in my tenure. Goes to George Wythe. And I remember very early on meeting him, and he asked me a very simple question. He said, "Why can't I take AP Calculus?" I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, why can't I take that class here at George Wythe?" And I said, "Again, I don't understand what you're saying." And he said, "Well, Mr. Kamras, that class is not offered at George Wythe High School." And I was both stunned and yet not surprised, because yet again, nearly 100 years after my grandfather was initially denied access to medical school, and nearly 70 years after Spotswood Bowling was denied access to a brand new, beautiful building, yet again, here we were. Corey didn't have the chance to demonstrate how brilliant he was because we didn't even offer him the class. And I'm proud that we now offer not just AP Calculus, but lots more AP courses. And the Corey's in so many of them, I lose track of how many he is in. And he is doing incredibly well. But it's yet again another reminder of our failure, us, the adults, of creating opportunity for children by virtue of simply who they are. But whether it was 100 years ago because of religion, or 70 years ago, or today because of their race, or because of how much money their family has, or because of what country they just immigrated from, or what language they speak at home, or what learning disability they may have, or how they identify in terms of their gender, we still are holding kids back for no fault of their own, simply because of who they are. And I see the work of what we do at RPS and in education more broadly, and I think this is true of U of R and all institutions of education. Yes, it is about teaching reading and history and mathematics and art, of course. But I believe we will have failed if we don't also prepare our young people, not just with the skills, but with the dispositions and the social capital and the political capital, to change the structures that continue to exist to this day, that hold kids back simply because of who they are. And it's why this award is so beautiful, and why I was thrilled to participate when I heard about it, because it honors people, teachers, students, community partners, who have dedicated their minds, their hearts, their souls, their time to changing these structures, to making our community a more just and more equitable community that will, over time, lift kids up instead of holding them back. And I couldn't think of anything more powerful, more honorable to do than that. And it's why I'm thrilled to join you. I'm honored to be a part of this celebration. And again, to each and every one of the recipients, thank you for what you do every day. It is so, so important. It makes my job a little bit easier. And if we had every resident of Richmond demonstrating the commitment that you have made to the broader community, I am certain that 100 years from today, let's hope it's not 100, maybe 10, 15, 20 years from today, I won't be able to tell stories like Alvin, Spotswood, and Corey, because we will have changed the structures, the systems, the laws, the policies, the practices that hold kids back. And we will be known as a city that lifts kids up. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much for offering those stories and that powerful analysis of how change happens and what propels lasting change. And I'm going to turn now to start to unpack more. There's so much embedded in that, in your understanding of structural inequity. And we have three people here to help us find some more layers. So I'm going to turn to our panelists, who I know have each come with a question, and no doubt other questions will follow. And I'll ask them first each to introduce themselves briefly and their specific intersections with RPS and with Richmond Youth before they ask their question. And we'll turn to Dr. Browder first. Thank you, Laura, for kicking off our discussion.
Thank you, Sylvia. I'm an RPS parent of two, and my students and I have also spent many years collaborating with students and faculty in the Armstrong Leadership Program, as well as Armstrong alums from the class of 1966. And the story you told about Corey really resonated with me. And you know, the question that I've been thinking about as I read your wonderful daily emails is, you've really dedicated your entire administration to reducing the systemic inequities that plague Richmond public schools. And you've really focused on this during the pandemic, when these inequities have become so much more severe. So I'm wondering, what do you think that you've learned from what you've done during the pandemic that you'll be able to bring forward into a post-pandemic world as you continue to work on RPS for, I hope, many, many years to come?
Well, it's such a good question. First, let me just affirm what you said. The pandemic has made much more stark the inequities that already exist. And you know, I'll share this just as one bit of evidence of that. You know, we are a school system that largely serves children of color, and that has a majority of our staff are of color as well. And the toll that COVID-19 has taken on communities of color, and particularly low-income communities of color, is vastly different than the toll it's taken on white communities, and certainly upper-income white communities. And you see that play out in terms of people's perceptions about whether we should be open or closed, or how we should be using our resources during this time. And, you know, for anyone who's watching who is not as connected to communities of color or low-income communities, you know, I can attest from dozens, if not hundreds of conversations, the depth of fear and anxiety, because just about everyone knows someone who has been very sick or who has died. That's piece one. Piece two is, you know, the pandemic has made it even that much more difficult if you are living on the margins economically, losing jobs, losing housing, being scared about where your next meal is going to come from, which is why one of the things we've prioritized is our meal distribution program. From the day we closed, March 13th, to today, we have been delivering meals to our families to make sure that they are taken care of. We've delivered over 2 million meals in that time. In fact, you know, every morning from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m., we use our entire bus fleet to deliver meals to our bus stops, where kids can go, instead of getting on the bus to go to school, they go and get a breakfast and a lunch for the day. It's why our school day starts later than all the counties around us, because we've prioritized making sure that kids are fed so that they can be taken care of for the day. When we closed on March 13th, the vast majority of our students did not have a computer at home. Today, I'm glad to say that every single one of our kids who needed a device has now gotten one. So we went from, you know, basically maybe 3,000, 4,000 homes that had a device to 25,000 that had. As for what do we take from this going forward, to the core of your question, I do think we are learning some things about certainly virtual instruction that we can use to our advantage and to advance the cause of equity going forward. We talk a lot about the inequity that comes from digital learning, given the resource disparities, which I just discussed. But, you know, there are some really powerful things we can do virtually in terms of virtual learning. For example, I'm thrilled that this year, you know, our suspension rate will be 0. But it occurred to me as we move into in-person learning, whether that's this spring or next fall, there's no reason that any child should be suspended, sent home, and have them sit there doing nothing and fall further behind, which means they come back and are more likely to exhibit the same behaviors that they exhibited in the first place. Now we could have, whether it's at home or through special centers set up for this, if a student had to be suspended, there's no reason they couldn't continue each and every day virtually to make sure that they continue to be successful. Second, we have a number of kids who have found that the virtual setting is better for them. I will tell you, my own 9-year-old, he's a bouncer. and he likes to hum and tap and move, and the virtual setting in many ways has been a benefit to him in that respect. Now, obviously, there are young people that had much more severe learning disabilities or other aspects of how they learn that it makes it better for them if they want to maintain a virtual environment going into the future. So I could keep going on and on, but there are a number of things like this that I'm excited for us to really be reflective about and figure out how do we leverage, now that everyone does have technology, to help more kids be successful. I'm just going to throw in one more. We just started a program called Con Ganas, which is focused on our English learner population. And it's a flexible way to complete your high school credits to get your GED or your high school diploma. We're shooting for the high school diploma. We started it this fall with 20 kids, and it lends itself very nicely to the virtual setting. Some of our young people feel compelled to work to support their families during the day, and the Con Ganas program allows them to flexibly complete their schedules in the evening, on weekends. So I see this as something that we will expand rather significantly going forward to support that student population. So again, lots of things like this that have forced us to think differently about how we do school that I think we could leverage to close some of those opportunity gaps we've been talking about.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. I'm so glad to be here. I'm a first grade teacher at Broad Rock in RPS, which is its south side, and I love it, and I really think that it's a privilege to be a teacher, and it's such a blessing to be in RPS. My friends hear me talk about it all the time. And I also graduated from U of R in 2019, and just really care about Richmond kids and the equity work that's happening here, so I decided to stay and work here. I have mentored 2 RPS 5th graders for almost 6 years. So they have walked with me all throughout college, and I've walked with them since their kindergarten. They started kindergarten, and they are the reason I want to be a teacher, and I am a teacher. And I also am a CASA, or special advocate, for a child in foster care in Richmond. So I'm just so thankful for the kids that I get to know and that we get to work with, and they just really are change makers, and I get to learn from them every day. And Mr. Kamras, I'm so thankful to be under your leadership, and I love working in RPS, and I'm so glad that I'm here. And my question for you is, even though it's difficult, there have been so many victories with virtual teaching. What moment or story has been your favorite victory so far?
That is such a good question. First, let me just show, I'm not being disrespectful with my t-shirt. We just had a spirit day today, so I've got my RPS Teachers Rock shirt on. So Cassie, that's for you. Our teachers really do rock, and they're working so hard to reinvent themselves. So thank you so much. And for folks who don't know, Broad Rock, as Cassie said, on the south side, it's a school that was built for 600 kids, and up until this year had about 1,000 kids. About 300 of those were in trailers outside on the lawn because the school wasn't big enough, and was largely serving our rapidly increasing Latino population, largely from Central America. I'm thrilled that we were able to build a new Cardinal Elementary, used to be called Green Elementary, which is a much larger school than the old Green, and is taking a lot of those kids from Broad Rock. I know the teachers there are going to miss some of those kids, but when you come back in person, you'll notice that a good number of those trailers won't be there, which is a good thing. So just wanted to note that. That's also an equity piece, right? Just the physical space that you get to go to school in. Okay, victories. Oh gosh, what a great question. Well, let me come up with a couple. My most personal victory is after the first day of school, I asked my two boys, one who's in 6th grade and one who's in 4th grade in RPS, how it went. And they said, Dad, it was better than we expected. So I'll take that as a huge victory. I think reflecting on, the first month or so far, I've had a chance to visit a lot of classes. One of the cool things is I can visit Broad Rock on the south side and then Holton on the north side with the snap of a finger. And normally that would take 15, 20 minutes to travel. And I've just been so impressed by what our teachers are doing. Just so creative, and how they're coming up with ways to engage kids, and the avatar classrooms and the Bitmoji classrooms, and the all the different things that now, I consider myself pretty tech savvy, but now I feel like I'm behind the curve, given everything you guys have been doing. So I'd say it's just a whole bunch of like little victories as I pop from classroom to classroom to see what our teachers are doing, and to see what our kids are doing. And, it's hard, no doubt, but they're resilient and they're making it work too. So to see that, and I think hearing from families, hearing from parents who have said, look, this is really hard, but thank you for closing and putting health and safety first. And so I think, yeah, it's just like a whole bunch of those little victories all together have sustained me. And I'm under no illusion. We have a lot to work on and continue to improve. And I do stay up thinking about some kids that I'm worried about, who the virtual setting is really not good for. And how we make sure they get the support that they need. So I don't want to sugarcoat this at all. But there are a lot of little victories that have made me very hopeful.
I agree. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
How you doing, Superintendent Kamras? My name is Omar Ibrahim. I'm a senior honor scholar here at the University of Richmond, and I'm a leadership studies major. Through my time as a Bonner Scholar, I have served in the future centers of Thomas Jefferson High School as well as John Marshall High School, and have spent the majority of my service at the Salvation Army Boys and Girls Club over in Churchill. So I have spent a lot of time with a lot of your students and getting to know them really well. And so I originally had a question that was very similar to Dr. Browder's, and you answered most of it. So we're gonna go a little bit off script here, and I'm gonna ask you something else. And first and foremost, I'd like to shout out Dr. Tom Shields, a leadership education professor. And so he's really inspired my question here. And so in this class, we've talked a lot about the education disparities that exist in the Metro Richmond area, especially when you compare RPS to the school districts in Hanover, Chesterfield, and Henrico. And so I was curious, I know this is a problem that far goes past just being a superintendent and is gonna have to go into legislation and policy. But I was wondering, what role does RPS and you as a superintendent play in mitigating some of these issues of achievement gaps and opportunity gaps between the counties and the city?
I love a good audible. So thank you. Really great question. First, are you from San Francisco, or you just love the Golden Gate Bridge?
I like to go. Okay. I'm a little messy right now, so I was like, let me throw something on.
Okay, all good. I have a brother who lives out there, so I was going to chat with you about that, but all good. So, gosh, what a great question. So, I see the job of being superintendent as twofold. One, running the school system to make it more equitable. So that's things like making sure Corey gets to take AP classes. I'll give you another example. When I got here, I found out that there's two types of diplomas you can get in high school in Virginia: a standard diploma and an advanced diploma. It should come as no surprise that if you want to go to college, getting an advanced diploma is the better way to go. Well, all of our specialty schools that you have to apply to, which Places like Richmond Community Open and Franklin Military Academy. The default setting in our student information system for the type of diploma that you would be scheduled for in terms of which classes and whatnot is advanced. But the default setting at Armstrong with Marshall, Huguenot, and TJ was standard. So, talk about systemic racism. There it is. That's a systemic institutional representation. So I see my job as changing all of those things within RPS. I also, though, see my job as using my platform, my voice, my position to change the things outside of RPS. And not everybody likes that I do that. So I get into a little bit of trouble now and then. But, I sort of think of this as like, if I'm not using my voice for that, then I'm not really doing my full job. So it's why, I speak out a lot about whether it's issues of race in the city, issues of housing or employment or whatever the case may be, and try to push and advance the cause of justice in those other areas as well. Look, I'm also a white leader with a lot of power in a school system that largely serves kids of color in a city that has a horrendous history when it comes to race. And so, if I can be a co-conspirator, as it were, with leaders of color to change things, and if I can get maybe some folks to listen who wouldn't otherwise listen, if only because I'm white, well then great. Then I think I should do that, and I will continue to do it. I don't believe, there are some people in the education world who think, there's no way to improve outcomes for kids until we fix poverty and fix racism. There are other people who think, we can't use poverty and racism as excuses. Schools can do it alone. I'm squarely in the middle. It's a both and proposition. There's a lot that we can do better in school, and there's a lot that society has to do better. And we have to keep fighting on both of those fronts if we're going to get the outcomes we want for kids.
Thank you.
Those were such great questions. And we have a question that's come in from a participant, also an award winner, Brianna Silva, who was just awarded one of our Service for Change awards. And her question is, in what ways are teachers and the RPS schools prepared for a trauma-informed approach in the classroom, especially as children undergo trauma from COVID-19?
Another great question. Yeah, this one is really close to my heart. It's so important that we are supporting our teachers to support their kids, many of whom face really unspeakable traumas. And I use that adjective, unspeakable, very intentionally. I mean, there are things our kids go through that I literally don't want to utter because they are so painful to say. And I'm sure Cassie has become aware of some of these things. And in most teacher prep programs, you're just not trained to support kids that go through things like this. And there are really specific skills that you can develop to help identify, when a child is experiencing trauma, and then how to support them. And this is something that we have started to do. We have enshrined in our strategic plan, both trauma-informed training and restorative practices training. We've begun at a handful of schools. Our approach is trying to go deep rather than broad and not very effective. I've found in 25 years in education, the best way to achieve nothing is to try to do everything. And so we've tried to really focus our energies in a few places to begin to develop a deep set of skills. I'm thrilled that we have Ram Bhagat, who's a real leader in this field, who joined the team about a year or so ago to help us do this work. I was actually earlier today participating in the quote Zen Den at Bouchal Middle School, which is a virtual mindfulness room. And they had one of their mindfulness community circles that I got to participate in with some of their students. And that is something that we're trying to build out division-wide. I'm also very proud this year, and I'm curious to hear Cassie share her own experience, but in every classroom across the division this year, we start with a community circle every morning, which is built on the principles of restorative practices and trauma-informed practices to build those human relationships between teachers and kids, between kids and each other. I sometimes eavesdrop on my own two boys as they're doing their breathing exercises as part of their morning circle every morning. And Sylvia, I know you had us start off that way as well. But these things are really important. They're not just this kind of warm and fuzzy nonsense. There is incontrovertible brain science now about the importance of helping kids lower their cortisol levels, which is the chemical that spikes when they're feeling tense and in toxic stress, so that they can be in what's called executive function mode, which is basically a fancy way of saying learning mode. So this stuff is absolutely critical. I'll add, we have a lot more to do, so we've just started. And it's also really critical for teachers too. So, you know, a lot of teachers have experienced trauma in their lives. And so sometimes kids acting out on their trauma triggers teachers' trauma, and that's a real challenge as well. So part of this work is really creating space and time for teachers to get the support that they need and process the things that they're dealing with in their own lives so that they can be supportive of kids going forward. Last piece, since I believe it was Brianna mentioned it, I do think COVID is adding to that rather significantly. And I even have data on this because we have we use a system called Gaggle, which basically for kids' safety monitors online activity, and when there are indications of self-harm or getting into some sort of trouble, we basically get an alert. And that's gone up rather precipitously over the last couple of months. And in part because we just have a lot more kids online, but in part because kids are feeling isolated. In fact, we had an online discussion about this last night on our RPS Live channel. And it's why we've invested a lot more in terms of personnel and time in reaching out and making connections with kids. So we now have 20 family liaisons, which we started this year, whose whole job, they're housed in the community at 4 hubs around the city, and their whole job is connecting with families to make sure that when kids might be in trouble or family might be in trouble, they get the support they need, whether that's housing or food or with a domestic abuse situation or whatever the case may be. Still a lot more to do, but I'm excited about where that's going.
Cassie, I wonder if you might want to comment on any aspect of that from your experience as a teacher. There's a lot of love happening in the chat for the morning circles. And I wonder if you've learned so far, Cassie, about that approach.
Yes, I love the morning circles. I think it's best practice in the classroom too. And it's just like so special to have that time in the morning that's dedicated to nothing else, but getting to know each other and talking about things that matter to them. And like for my 6-year-olds, what matters to them is like who's in your family, like what food do you like? And then they get to practice listening and sharing and like reset their day. And like I always laugh during our morning circles, and we just start the day off with so much joy, and there's nothing better. I could like that's the hill I'll die on. Like I love morning circles.
Well, they're not going anywhere, Cassie, so don't worry.
I wonder if Laura or Omar or Cassie have a follow-up question that they want to pose, and then we have another couple that are coming in the chat as well, but I want to turn back to our panelists for a moment.
Well, my head is exploding with so many questions right now. I guess one of my questions is, Jason, you came into a situation where so many people were full of despair about RPS, had given up on RPS. There was a huge disconnect. And, you know, you've really worked hard. From the outside, it looks like you've been working very, very hard to undo some of that past damage. What are you thinking about to do to get the whole city of Richmond invested in the success of RPS and its students?
Thank you, Laura. Well, I have been working very hard, so, and my wife can attest to that. So I appreciate that it appears so. You know, I think, no, I know, like the city and RPS have a very difficult relationship. And on the one hand, you have a lot of folks in Richmond who have deep love and adoration for RPS because it was the pathway to the middle class or beyond for them. On the other hand, you have a lot of folks who have felt for a long time that it has failed them and it has failed their kids. Both of those things came through very strong when I got here. And so what I've tried to do is honor both of those, which is to say, yeah, there are some things that are really broken about RPS, and just to be very straight about that. You know, the Carver cheating scandal was one of the worst kept secrets in Richmond. It only took about a week for me to hear from about a dozen different people that it was going on. But nobody ever wanted to just lay it all out there. We were, frankly, we were giving out diplomas we shouldn't have been giving out. So I know there are various political candidates talking about how our graduation rate has dropped. The reason it dropped the first year I was here is because we stopped rubber stamping diplomas. And so I think truth telling is a really important part of that. But it's also, I think that has to be balanced with celebrating all that is beautiful and strong and resilient and extraordinary about RPS. And there are a lot of incredible things happening. And all you have to do is just spend some time in some of our classrooms. You know, I think some of RPS's greatest critics have never stepped foot inside an RPS school. And I invite everyone to come in to visit. I mean, it's very easy to do now. You just get a link from a teacher. And, you know, no, not everything is going to be perfect. There are still lots of things that are broken and need to be fixed. But you're also going to see a lot of extraordinary, beautiful, and inspiring things. And so I've tried to honor both of those narratives. And I will continue to do that. There is still much that is broken about RPS that we have to address. You know, the next big thing on my radar screen, you know, when we do come back, is really digging into our exceptional education programming for students. And this is no shade on our teachers, not at all. I just don't think we are supporting teachers, and I don't think we have the central office structures and everything in place that we need to improve outcomes for kids with learning disabilities. We have a wonderful new director of our exceptional education program who I adore and think she's going to lead us to great places, but we're not there yet. And so again, I think it's about just being honest about where we are and celebrating the amazing things. And I can celebrate all day because There's just such wonderful things. And, you know, I think if we gave the mic to Cassie for a minute, she could tell you 20 stories about her kids or the work that she's doing. You know, just yesterday or the day before in my daily email was this extraordinary mural at 3rd and Broad that's in part designed and features one of our own 9th graders from Open High School. I think, Laura, you had a student, or you have a student at Open. It's not only beautiful, but it's really powerful, speaking to a lot of the issues that our community is grappling with right now. And, you know, that's just one example. I think the day before, a couple days before, we had a drum solo from one of our graduates from Richmond community. He is now at the Berkeley College of Music, one of the preeminent musical schools in the country. That was stunning. So lots and lots to celebrate, which we will continue to do. So yeah, you know, over the next several years, and I hope to be here for several years, I will continue to go anywhere and talk to anyone, whether you love RPS or hate RPS. I want to hear from you and talk with you about what we can do to become even stronger.
Thank you.
That is a great segue to what will probably be our final question. It just came in the chat, and I want to hold it up. It's perfectly in line with the spirit of this event and with what the CCE, the Center for Civic Engagement, stands for, which is always trying to deepen our collaborations and connections in the city. And so a colleague here has asked, how can the University of Richmond assist with healing the healers? That is, helping teachers to charge their batteries and share with our fellow educators. And I would invite you to also think broadly, what do you see as what are the things that the University of Richmond might offer to support RPS? Many things are already happening, but what comes to mind for you?
Yeah, well, I do want to shout out, I mean, U of R is doing a lot of things to support RPS kids and to support RPS generally. President Crutcher has been just wonderful and personally very supportive and offered great counsel in the way that he does. You know, I think, you know, what most comes to mind, frankly, is a lot of the things that are being honored today. It's about making it clear that being a U of R student means being involved in the community that is Richmond. You know, if you spend your entire time at U of R at that beautiful campus, and it is beautiful, but you have not engaged with all the wonderful and diverse neighborhoods here in Richmond and the people in them, you know, I think your education is not complete. And so, and that's not just for U of R, that's for everyone, all institutions of education. And so I guess I'd say is continue to boldly go down this path where real, authentic engagement and interaction with the community in all of its various complexities is what it means to be a spider, right? That's what it is. And so I would say just keep pushing and keep looking for those opportunities and keep lifting up professors and students and partners who are making that happen.
Thank you. You have said perfectly what so many of us feel, and it's exactly what we're here to do. So I'll just end by saying thank you. Thank you for taking a time out in your extraordinary day and spending that with us. And thank you to everyone else who's popped in and who's asked questions, and to our panelists. And a reminder to all of us that there are many more stories to hear over the next week about the award winners this year, and we will hold them up and affirm the work that they are doing to collaborate and connect deeply in our city towards social change. And we know that this is really about dismantling and rebuilding structures that work. So we're in it together, and thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. Congratulations, everybody.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.